All right. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining me again this evening for Paranormal Planet Live. I'm Jack, your host and the founder of the Paranormal Intelligence Agency. Our website is there in the bottom of the screen. Come by and check it out for exclusive reports on our forensic investigations that you won't find anywhere else. Hello, everybody in the chat. It's good to see you guys here. And tonight, I don't have a real long presentation for you guys, but I thought we would talk about the Bigfoot species, Sasquatch, in particular because, as you know, I'm in the process of relocating to an area where I've been given access to a 1,000-acre plot of land that is held as a private nature preserve by a single individual who happens to be a childhood friend of mine and has agreed to allow me to use this parcel of land as a private laboratory for attempting final discovery of the Bigfoot species. And so my mind has been very much on Sasquatch lately, as it always is when I'm sort of gearing up to go out and do some heavy field work. This is one of those opportunities that cryptozoologists dream of. I just happen to be lucky to know someone who was able to, buy a 1,000-acre ranch that is solely used as a private hunting preserve, and literally only has people on it maybe 2 or 3 times in an entire year. There is no other human activity. There are multiple Ozark ponds. Some people would call them lakes on this property. In Oklahoma, we call them ponds. And it's right in the foothills of the Ozarks there. So it's in a county that's known to have more Bigfoot activity than all 6 surrounding states combined. And this is a place with a long, long history of Bigfoot encounters. So we will not van Liberty ask, will you have some kind of building on the property for your ops? No, strictly no building is permitted on on his land. He wants to keep it exclusively as raw nature as he can, and I don't blame him for that. That being said, of course, we can pitch tents and all that kind of stuff. Sabrina is with us tonight. She's always fun to have around on the chat board. But this opportunity is going to allow me to deploy some live equipment, by which I mean I'm going to be able to be in my house and literally see when something moves in front of a camera. It will alert me instantly. And so this is going to be a really interesting experiment to begin with. We're going to be really, really careful and try not to spook whatever may be there. I've been to this property a few times, and I can tell you it is the most amazing habitat I've ever seen for this species. Easily could exist there without anybody ever knowing that they're there. And once I show you just what I mean by the geography of that area, you'll come to understand. Excuse me, it's really cold here. Another good reason to move back to Oklahoma, so I'm excited about that. You get nice warm weather year round, and it really helps to not impede your cryptozoology field work, and so I'm very excited about that. So we're going to be deploying a number of different techniques. Some of them are new ideas that I'm not going to discuss until we have them on camera. Some of them are techniques that J.C. Johnson taught to me before his passing. And we're going to be talking about one of J.C. Johnson's biggest accomplishments on one of these images. So tonight I prepared, it's a very short video clip. I'm just going to let it play while we talk. We're going to talk about the genetic diversity of this species and how recognizable that diversity is in the closest face shots that we have of the species that's been taken by a number of different investigators throughout the years. I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare this clip, so it's a little rough, but it serves the purpose. And if you look on the YouTube channel here for the PIA, you'll see a video called The Many Faces of Bigfoot. I also compare a lot of photographs of close-ups of Sasquatch creatures side by side so that you can also get a very good look at the differences in the faces. And I've been pointing this out for a long time, really since J.C. Johnson pointed it out to me, that their faces are as distinct as humans. They are that different from one another. And that's part of, this overall mystery. It's part of the evidence for them being a human hybrid, which I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that's what they are. And I also suspect, for those of you who know my theories, that these creatures are, in fact, a chimera animal, that they are an artificially, genetically, biologically constructed creature by the ET presence on this planet. And I published a ton of information about that in my last book, Bigfoot Unleashed, but we'll talk about some of that tonight. The interesting thing about Bigfoot, Sasquatch species, if you will, is that it's found on, or a variation of it is found on, every continent. That is something that is considered to be biologically impossible. And you find only a couple of species that are found on every continent. One of those happens to be a dung beetle, and the other is a type of bird. And that's it. And so one of the biggest mysteries of the Sasquatch species, and I prefer Sasquatch over Bigfoot because it's more in keeping with what I think they are, which is a human hybrid. But how do we explain that this creature is found on every continent, even the UK? If UK eyewitnesses are to be believed, and some of them seem entirely credible and sincere. And, we know the UK doesn't have 700 million uninhabited, heavily forested acres like the United States does. And literally, you can go across the board. You can talk about the Yowie in Australia, or the Yeren in China, or the, Almasty in Russia. It goes on and on. And there is no natural biological explanation for that. That exists anywhere. That should not be able to happen in our biosphere, simply by virtue of the fact of the biodiversity that takes place. And that too, I think, lends a lot of credence to the theory of the ET connection to these animals. So we're also going to talk about their abilities. So these animals, by virtue of their amazing DNA, they've been able to escape, final disclosure, if you will, or final, finally bringing them out to the public, finally having a specimen, finally having a scientist pluck DNA off that specimen and submit it to the World Genetic Bank so that anytime other DNA from the species is found, it can be matched. That is going to take an enormous effort. And I'm not entirely convinced that anyone will ever be able to actually bring in an actual body part from one of these creatures simply because of their um, close knit causal relationship with an ET presence. In other words, I think that they're probably being monitored all the time. And I'm not sure the ETs would allow you to actually make your way into the public with, you know, remains of one of these animals. Um, and it's interesting because recently I was going through some Timothy Good um, writings, one of his books. And Timothy Good is a ufologist from the UK who wrote some interesting books. And in one of his books, he recounts a number of alien abductee eyewitness testimonies where they claim not only were they led into wooded areas, but they also witnessed these creatures in the presence of what they described as being gray aliens. So it's a huge amount of evidence, and I've talked extensively about it, published about it, talked about the DNA and how the DNA shows that this is the case, that they are in fact a chimera. And so let's talk about and show you some of the different clips and faces that are proposed to be these creatures. Now this one, I'm going to go back to here. It goes by really fast. So this lady right here, this was what I was talking about when I was mentioning J.C. Johnson. So this female, and she was a female, was given the nickname Matilda. And she was done so by the Adrian Erickson Project. Some of you probably know the history of the Adrian Erickson Project. Some of you probably don't. I'll go over it briefly for those who don't. Adrian Erickson was or is a investigator into Bigfoot. He is a very wealthy man. He spent $500,000 of his own money obtaining not only this video evidence, but some other video evidence which has never been released, which is so shocking that people would just automatically scream hoax, even though none of it is, right? DNA was collected off of this animal. That DNA was actually analyzed. And then a number of mainstream media outlets actually ran the story about this. And if you Google ABC News, Bigfoot is real right now, you're going to pull up a clip of them talking about it. And they'll show Matilda here in some of those clips, and she's turning her head and stuff. JC was part of the Adrian Erickson Project. I became his protege shortly thereafter all of this occurred. And this was in a remote part of Kentucky. It was part of a multi-year gifting process, habituation process. The landowners never wanted any recognition or any kind of publicity, and so they never got any. So they are still, private to these days. So is their land. This creature actually fell asleep. I believe it was given some sort of, sleeping pill and meat, basically. Fell asleep, and they were able to walk right up on it. They got a camera. It's right, looking right at the animal. They take the DNA off of it. And everybody in the group there was thinking, this is it. We got it. This is final discovery. And so the mainstream media outlets, they ran this big story, and you'll watch it. And the next day, you just heard crickets. There was nothing. You never saw another follow-up story about it since that period. And it's one of those things where, it's kind of like the UFO phenomenon. If people don't have a body or if you if you can't present to them evidence that they can no longer deny, then they'll just keep denying. And that's what ended up occurring here. They claimed that the DNA was contaminated with human DNA. As we know, it always comes back with the mitochondrial DNA as being Homo sapien. The paternal DNA always comes back as unknown primate. Same thing happened here, and then they obviously claimed that this was a person in a suit of some kind, which is clearly and totally preposterous. The people involved with that project were some of the best in the field. So that's what happened with her. And here you can see a very close-up picture of a Sasquatch face. Now look at the eyes. Those are truly amazing. And I think these creatures can see an infrared light, much like a reindeer can, and certain species of antelope. And I think that's what allows them to be able to avoid many trail cameras. Now, some trail cameras appear to have caught some images during daylight hours. Perhaps it's harder for them to see the cameras, etc. But we're going to go on here. This picture, you can see that's a pretty scary picture. And what intrigues me about it is the angle of the knees, the way the leg is being picked up at this almost 90-degree angle. And whoever snapped that photograph is probably, oh, my video is not good. Somebody says, I'll pay for a better camera. This is actually a real good camera. It just came from Microsoft. That's funny. They just avoid talking about Todd's photos. That's right. They sure do. And it's such a huge, explosive topic, Todd Standing. I'm going to do a show just on Todd Standing and present everybody my investigation. And I investigated the man, not the pictures. And what I discovered is pretty interesting. So let's go on here. And I'm just going to let this roll. So many of you have seen a lot of these different photographs, images. This particular one is interesting because this type of Sasquatch, if you will, this facial type where you can see sort of that, just the mid-range of the face, sort of right in this area and everything else is covered up, is something that's been photographed a number of times in the Bigfoot species. And yes, those faces kind of look alike, but many of them just clearly do not. Now that's a scary face. That one I'm unsure about, but we're going to come to one that's very interesting that was apparently photographed by a truck driver. And this is a spooky picture. There's the Yeti Day, or I'm sorry, the Beast of Seven Shoots. We're going to talk about the Yeti Day. We're going to. And you can see all the different kinds. Okay, so here's Matilda actually laying on the ground in Kentucky when they walked right up on her and took that DNA. Yeah, and they do kind of look like Wookiees, that particular kind do. But there's such a very, very wide variation. Some of them look very, very human. Some of them look more like a great ape. And again, this is just random clips that I was coming across. That's from a drone looking at a Sasquatch on the ground. And we're going to come up to an interesting photo here shortly that we're going to discuss. Now that one is interesting because this particular type of Sasquatch has also been reported. You can clearly see this looks like a great ape of some kind. I will point out that this particular kind of Bigfoot was also recently featured on Paranormal Caught on Camera. For those of you who catch that show from time to time, you'll recall a father and son. His son was 9 years old, and they were out in this wooded area, and one of these things pops out from behind a tree and looks right at them, and it was pretty close. It was it actually is pretty spooky that it could get that close to them without making the noise, and being that silent. And they are completely silent. Now, this guy, I want you to take particular note of. This is a frame of a video that was sent to me and JC Johnson from a gentleman in North Carolina. The gentleman thought he was seeing something in the film. This is actually blown up 800%, so you could tell it took us a long time to find what he was talking about. And we found the frames. There's only 3 frames, so it's only there extremely briefly. And it's in this photograph that you can see, and on the thumbnail for this video, that you can see the face of this creature. And here you can also see how well it's able to camouflage itself. And I've talked about their hair structure and their ability. There's an oil inside the shaft of the hair that absorbs light from the foliage around them and basically bounces that light back out. So they're able to almost look green when they're surrounded by completely green foliage. We'll come up to a better photo, but this is the nose, the mouth, the cone-shaped head. And when you see the cleaned up photo, you'll see that it has some sort of black marking around its eyes. This photo has been out there a long time. That thing is gigantic. Now, this image came from a tree cam. And that's a scary face. I don't think anybody wants to come up against that thing in the middle of the woods at nighttime, 9 feet tall, 800 pounds of pure rage. A creature like that can do anything it wants. And if it wants to take a human, it'll take them. And for those of you that have seen my video, Bigfoot and the Missing, it's on this channel. I urge you to take a look at it before you go out to wilderness areas. It will show you a lot of very, very interesting evidence that supports the idea that some of the missing people in the national park system are in fact being predated by some of these creatures. So we'll move on, but I found that face to be one of the more disturbing, and I don't believe that that's been hoaxed. Here's yet another very disturbing face, yet another. And here is the photograph that was taken by a trucker who had to pull his truck over, and this guy was staring down at him from up on this cliff. And that's a spooky, spooky figure. Imagine pulling your truck over and then notice, feel like you're being watched, and you look up and, oh my God, this guy's looking down at you. And, that's what I'm talking about as far as, and have always been talking about ever since my experiences out in the field, is that these are not Harry and the Henderson type of creatures. Just because they leave humans alone largely doesn't mean that they're friendly. They are so intelligent that they know that if they engage with humans, it's probably better to take them than to leave them, as a witness. Yeah, it does look like it's kind of holding a baby there. So, and this also is apparently from a tree cam, but you can tell that it was during the daytime. And you can clearly see the human-like characteristics in these animals. Now, right here is another perfect example. So just like the North Carolina Bigfoot, you can see the nose here. Here's the eye and actual light bouncing off of the iris. And here is the whole face of this creature, and it's just absorbing the green from around it and projecting that outward. I believe that this is what people think of as cloaking, and I believe it's a natural mechanism. In other words, I think their ability to cloak, which like this is very much like a chameleon, but over their entire body, is something built into their DNA and not them all of a sudden disappearing into another dimension. I think that it is their DNA and how advanced it is and constructed to be that allows them it appears to us almost like they have magical abilities, but in fact, it's just extremely advanced DNA work. And we'll keep going here. Okay, so here's another perfect example. So you can clearly see the face. Here's the mouth, the cheekbone. You can see that mid region of the face where there's no fur, right through here, and the cone head. This was taken by a very good Bigfoot investigator and a friend of mine named Scott Carpenter. And he's, as far as credibility goes, top notch. I don't believe Scott Carpenter would fake or hoax anything ever. And that's my professional opinion. And he caught this one, and you can see again their amazing ability to just absorb the color around them. We're going to come to another really good example. Okay, this is yet another perfect example. And this comes to us by way of Jeff and Teresa Yellick, who I know, and they're very, very credible people. The before and after of this photograph is amazing because the face just isn't there. You can see the nose, here's the eye, the cone head, as it's peering out between these two trees. And here again, you can see this ability to take on this gray color that's in the bark of the tree. It is, they have nature's best camouflage. It is truly remarkable. You can be looking at one of these creatures from 20 feet away and you just won't see it because it's blended so well with its surroundings. And let's bring up the next one here. Now, this one's described as a frozen dead Sasquatch, and we're going to stop here and talk about this guy. So, some of you may not realize or know anything about this particular image, the photographs that are out there. It's called the Yeti de Bourganeuf, and it's named after the village of Bourganeuf in France, where this was put on display. All that's left is a newspaper article and newspaper photographs, which these are the newspaper photographs from that file. The reporter who wrote the article is no longer living. There was nothing else in the file. And in the newspaper article, it merely states that this was put on display, that it was in fact a wild man from the woods, and that the gentleman who had it was going to put it on display in other villages. However, there was no record of that having ever occurred. And so we're left with a big mystery. Um, Many researchers, myself included, when you examine all of that information, this is a very real body. And this is what this creature looked like. And another example of exactly what people describe here, yet in Europe. And that shouldn't be able to happen on a biological basis. So let's see what goes. It should be able to pull up. Yeah, here's a close up of the face. You can see the teeth, clearly see the eyes and all of that. So when we did an investigation into this mystery, that's what we found, and we even had an interpreter who spoke French call and talk to the people at the newspaper, talk to some people they recommended, and it was just a total dead end. So, and so that's what I've got for you guys as far as um, clips go. And again, I apologize. There are some better ones out there, and I'll be bringing those up in time. But that serves to demonstrate my point, which is the fact that it's not like when they discovered silverback gorillas and you come upon a troop of them and they all look very, very much alike. In the case of this species, it looks like you walk upon a group of humans where every face is very distinct from one another. And their abilities, which I'll mention before I wrap up the show here. Thanks, Van. You guys are a great audience out there. So people have often asked me, how come you can't get that definitive evidence, footage, remain, etc.? So you're talking about a creature that has a human-like intelligence, but with superhuman-like abilities. A creature that can run 65, 70 miles an hour over uneven mountainous terrain. A creature whose foot hinges at a 45-degree angle, allowing it to scale sheer rock walls like they're not even there. An animal with smelling acute enough to smell you from 2 miles away and binocular vision that can see you from a mile away. A creature that travels in family units or packs, who exhibits pack hunting behavior, and who clearly does something with its dead. And yes, an animal like that can stay hidden for as long as it wants to, especially when it has a causal relationship to the ET presence on this planet. And I've done shows about that before. I think the evidence is clear that that relationship exists, and that there's just a mountain of evidence to support it. And that's not outlandish in any way. If you watched last week's show, you'll know that the Pentagon's OSAP program. Thank you very much, Sabrina. Much appreciated for your support. The Pentagon's OSAP program inadvertently has solved the Dogman mystery for us as paranormal investigators. And when you watch that show, you'll know what I mean. Also, I have written a summary of their findings and what those findings imply, and that is now on the paraintelagency.com website. And that's all I got for you. So thanks for being with me tonight, guys. Like I said, this is me sort of refocusing now on the Bigfoot mystery. As far as I'm concerned, until there is more data that comes out, which is contrary to the data which has now been produced by these world-class scientists dealing with the OSAP program, the Dogman mystery is solved in my mind. I don't think you can ever overcome the causal connection that they have now made without a shadow of a doubt to the ET presence and to the paranormal activity that they were experiencing nonstop as they were studying the UAP/UFO phenomenon. So take a look at last week's show. I go into detail about that, and there's an article up for subscribers. So I will see you guys next Thursday evening. Things are kind of moving fast around here as far as relocating. So next couple of weeks are going to kind of be up in the air. And I'll just kind of keep you posted as to how all of that's going. Anyway, thank you. North Carolina Jeannie, thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. And I will see you guys next Thursday night, and I will be bringing yet another deep, dark mystery for us to explore. And I appreciate you guys showing up. Thanks a lot.